Hey folks, Greg Burkart here, and welcome to my horror party. First off, thanks to all of you who dropped by with some feedback on the series premiere, except maybe that one guy. If you missed the basket case episode, please do check it out. I'm still going through a sort of settling in period with this format, so your input is definitely appreciated. So much for the housekeeping. See what I did there? Housekeeping. Let's check out our next party pick. It's a 1986 horror comedy. It's loaded with rubber monsters, and it's a who's who of 80s TV stars.
Believe it or not, I'm walking on air. Afternoon, everybody. No!
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember when those shows were new.
Okay.
Not to mention, it's got plenty of genre cred, with Friday the 13th director Sean Cunningham producing, and of course director Steve Miner, who also brought us Friday the 13th parts 2 and 3, and the original story comes from FRED DEKKER, the guy behind Night of the Creeps and Monster Squad.
Wolfman Scott, nar!
Those are just a few of the reasons we want to party at this particular house. But before we get into that, let's back up a few steps. I covered most of this in detail in episode 1, so I'm going to keep the recap as short as possible. Here's the deal. Some horror movies are serious art, and others are just fun. The fun factor has absolutely nothing to do with budget. In fact, some of the best horror party movies probably cost about $1.05 to make, and that's kind of the point. It's not about how good or bad a movie is either. For example, The Room is one of the most popular midnight movies in the world, and it sucks on toast. Today's movie isn't what I'd call low budget. It cost around $3 million to make, plus it raked in over 7 times that amount at the box office. So obviously it delivered what horror audiences wanted, and its popularity led to 3 sequels. Sort of. I'll get to that later. House has a scrappy, chaotic spirit that makes it a hell of a good time to watch with a group of friends, and adding your favorite intoxicants to the mix can make it even more fun. It's a totally silly film, but damn well knows it. The effects are goofy, the comedy's kind of clunky, but the actors seem to be having fun with the material.
What you doing? Me?
I'm also going to suggest a little party game that might enhance your enjoyment of House. Speaking of which, I've lined up a little beverage that fits the theme of today's movie, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But first, I'm going to post this disclaimer again. Before I break down the rules of the house, give me exactly 2 minutes to tell you about the movie. I tried to fit this into 1 minute like last time, but there's just too much information to shoehorn into 60 seconds. So, 2 minutes it is. Watch the timer that you see on the screen, and I'm going to be timing myself too, so go! House was born in 1983 when FRED DEKKER saw the big screen version of The Twilight Zone. He was inspired to team up with a group of fellow screenwriters, including Shane Black of future Predator fame, to create their own anthology. Dekker's chapter would have been a condensed version of what ultimately became House, but he didn't originally conceive the story as a horror comedy. His version played the scares totally straight, serving as an allegory for the very real horrors of PTSD haunting veterans of the Vietnam War. When that failed to pan out, DEKKER planned to expand the story to feature length. Sean S. Cunningham, still riding high on the success of the Friday the 13th franchise, decided to develop the project and tagged fellow Friday the 13th alumnus Steve Miner to direct. For the leads, Miner cast well-known TV stars. William Katt of The Greatest American Hero. Horror fans know him best as Tommy Ross in Brian De Palma's Carrie. George Wendt from Cheers, who also went on to multiple horror roles, and played Dean Halsey in the original stage production of Reanimator the Musical. Richard Moll from Night Court, who previously co-starred in the slasher classic Evil Speak. And Kay Lenz, Emmy-winning star of Rich Man, Poor Man and the popular TV horror movie The Initiation of Sarah. The house itself, which is very much a character in the film, was shot at a landmark Victorian home in Monrovia, California, and it still stands today under the name Mills View. The owners allowed the crew to repaint and temporarily remodel the exterior to make it look more threatening, but the massive interiors were built on a soundstage. The majority of the production schedule was taken up by the practical effects team, who created 7 distinct monsters for the film. And Miner commissioned multiple artists for the creepy paintings that figured prominently in the plot. House was a massive hit when it opened in February of 1986 and grossed over $6 million in its opening weekend. That success led to 3 sequels, 2 of which had no connection to the original story, and the final entry, House 4, brought back William Katt for what amounts to an extended cameo. Rumors of a planned remake are still just rumors, and maybe they'll go away. I hope you took notes because you might need them for this game. You also need to choose your form of mood-enhancing substance. I'm trying to be all-inclusive here, so if you're not a drinker, smoker, vapor, or whatever, there are still options for you. For example, spicy snacks offer a challenge and they boost your endorphins, which is always a good thing. The key here is to establish a dose of whatever you choose and stick with it. For example, 1 shot of liquor if your constitution can take it, a slug of wine, a chug of beer, a puff of your favorite cannabis delivery system except for edibles, which would be a grave mistake, or a bite of habanero pepper. Be creative. Also be sure to stay within the boundaries of your local laws and be mindful of your own limitations. It's just a movie, folks. There's no point in landing yourself in jail or the emergency room.
It's a very nasty scratch.
When it comes to party games, House is full of opportunities, so I came up with a unique set of rules that you can use for your own horror party. Of course, you can riff on these rules any way you like, or toss them out altogether and make your own. It's all good, just make sure you practice caution. Okay, here we go. Whenever anyone says the word house, take 1 dose.
It was the house that did it.
Will you shut up just for once, you old bat?
Touchy.
When each of the 7 monsters makes its first appearance, take 1 dose per monster. That includes Big Ben and the big fish once it comes to life. Every time one of Aunt Elizabeth's paintings shows up on screen, take 1 dose. Every time a weapon is used, take 1 dose.
Oops.
Every time Roger goes underwater, take 1 dose. That should be more than enough, but if you really want to live on the edge, wait for these 2 songs to play on the soundtrack. By my rules, every player must sing along for as long as each song is playing. Anyone who misses or forgets the lyrics after the first 3 seconds of the song has to take 2 doses. Now, here's my toxin of choice. For today's episode, I decided to skip mixing some gross cocktail like we did last time and try something a little more classy. And what could be a more ideal pairing for a haunted house movie than a haunted wine? So I did a little research and I found exactly what I was looking for. A lot of vineyards claim to have resident ghosts, but the Bogle Vineyard in Clarksburg, California took that concept and went nuts with it. Their so-called phantom wines have labels that look awesome and they're even interactive. If you download their app and use it to scan the label, it animates the artwork with spooky sound effects, and it also unlocks the secret codes that trigger short videos about alleged sightings of the ghosts stalking the Bogle grounds. I picked up their Phantom Red, which is about a 50-50 blend of Syrah and Zinfandel. I'm totally not a wine snob, so I'll spare you the fancy schmancy details. I will say it's very tasty, it's just sweet enough to have with dessert, and it also makes a nice pairing with buttered popcorn. Alright everybody, it's time for the movie. I'll be back later for some aftercare and to share some of my final thoughts about House. But for now, lights down, glasses up, roll film.
Let's all go to bed.
Gut check time. Just making sure you got through intact. Remember, don't feel bad if you couldn't keep up with the game. This is all about the shared experience. I already knew going in that House wasn't going to be particularly scary, although this scene usually gets quite a jump out of first-time viewers.
Sandy.
That's one of the reasons this movie is best enjoyed with a group. It never takes itself seriously, but the performances are pretty grounded considering how nutsoid the premise is, and the characters are quirky and likable. Despite the Vietnam subtext and the whole missing child scenario, it's a pretty lighthearted story, and it was really kind of silly to release it with an R rating, especially since the PG-13 was fully in place by 1986. There are a few F-bombs and MF-bombs, so that's probably the main reason, because the violence is so cartoony that the rest of the movie could have aired on the Disney Channel. Anyhow, because it's kind of tame, House has been the gateway drug to horror movies for a lot of curious kids, so you gotta give it up for that. So, what did you think? Did you follow my rules or make your own? Just tell me. That's what the comment section is for. I'd also like to see some suggestions for future party episodes, and maybe you could share the recipe for your chosen libation. Alright, party's over for now. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. And be sure to throw us a like before you go, and ring the little ding-a-ling thing to subscribe to JoBlo Horror for lots more groovy content. You'll be glad you did. Cheers.